Good morning and welcome back, everybody, to the show. When I started searching for political identity a couple years ago in law school, I didn't know much. I really had no idea what form it would take. All I knew is that I had an itch to scratch. I was learning critical race theory in law school. I found it very controversial. It really set off um, the fuse that caused me to start questioning if I wanted to keep voting for Democrats like I always have. And I knew that I was going to be exploring that question. And I knew that writing a blog would prove too difficult. I knew that I didn't have the discipline or focus or desire at the time, at least, to put that much work into a project. I think writing something well takes a lot of more time than I was willing to invest weekly. So I settled on a podcast and I've just been doing it. It became habit. I'm really proud of it. And here we are. Now, I didn't. So did I see? So I certainly didn't see, I should say, the fact that I would eventually become a player in the libertarian media ecosystem. I had no idea that I would connect with so many libertarians, let alone end up interviewing four of the main presidential candidates and some other key players, such as Angela McArdle, who is the and recently reelected chair of the Libertarian National Party. I actually interviewed her shortly after starting the podcast a couple of years ago, before she won that position the first time. She was a phenomenal guest, very thoughtful, very measured, very intelligent. I interviewed, I'm going to talk about briefly the four candidates. That's going to be the bulk of this episode, is me discussing my observations of the nomination process. Obviously, Chase Oliver just won, so I'm going to share all sorts of thoughts on that. But even Larry Sharpe. So I've and those are big names, but also I don't want to say random guests, but I've had the bulk of my guests have actually been libertarian people. So I'm surrounded by libertarians. No, they don't smell. Well, okay, we have Zoom, so okay, terrible joke. All right, but so as I said, my relationship with libertarians started years ago with the podcast, and I've been drawn to them because, as I said, studying critical race theory, the ultimate manifestation of identity politics, which I don't like, here is libertarianism, and it's the total antidote to libertarian to identity politics. It says identity politics is bullshit. We all come from God. All our rights are given from God, and we need to focus on those natural rights. Forget about the state bullshit and the rights that the state gives you. No, the state is a bullshit entity. We really just need to focus on the personal rights of individuals that come from God. That's very attractive. Okay. So I've been connecting with libertarians, but what really kicked this into high gear for me on November 4th, the exact date I have in my mind, because this is the first date that I went on with my girlfriend, who we are just madly in love. And we're 6.5 months into our relationship. Couldn't be happier. And so on November 4th of this past year, or of last year, my girlfriend and I had just started talking on Bumble, and we arranged a first date. Well, she said she likes comedy. So I said, okay, comedy show, San Diego. This guy, Dave Smith, was doing a show. So we went to the show that weekend. We had an amazing time. He was hilarious. He was profound. And I go, whoa, I gotta check this guy out. And oh my God. And now I'm plugged into the world of libertarians. Too plugged in, right? I actually have to take a step back and unpack what Dave Smith's role in this whole conversation is. But it was a great show, a great time. And I started following him, and now I'm like knee deep in the libertarian internal party politics, which I'll reference as we go on here. So Dave really jump started my interest culturally because he's cool, he's funny, he's clear, he's a great spokesperson for the liberty principles, for the liberty movement. That's what he, and so I later find out he was supposed to run this cycle. He's so respected, but he had a family issue, and by the time the family issue got resolved, it was too late for him to jump in. He had already endorsed Dr. Michael Ruchtenwald, and it was just too late for him this cycle. So very interesting things happening with Dave Smith. But that's what really provoked my interest. And after I saw Dave, I reached out to Mike Termott, another presidential candidate who was also one of the people that I already interviewed. I'd already interviewed Mike too, Mike Termott, who was amazing. I'm going to get to these 4 guys that I interviewed in a second. But so it's not like I was totally unfamiliar. But after seeing Dave, I interviewed Lars Mapstead, and then I had Mike Termott back on for the second time. Then I had Dr. Rechtenwald on, and then I had Chase on. And I'll just say, first of all, I'm so grateful to them. You know, they kind of took a dive deep into the lower recesses, you might say, of in terms of popularity and fame podcasts. And they were great experiences. I really got to know them a bit. I got to know libertarian principles a bit, and I started to become aware of this internal party politics. Real quick on each candidate, Lars, super focused, super thoughtful in the sense that he had his plan. He didn't want to, you know, so these libertarians, they never get more than 3% of the vote, right? And so you might say that they don't win, they never win, but they always have an effect on the race. And so that fast forwarding here, that's why Trump went to the convention this past weekend to try to get some of those people to vote for him because they could really hurt him again. So Lars is a guy that says, I know we only get 3% every year, so I'm going to cut down our ambitions. I'm going to keep it realistic. I'm a businessman. I'm going to keep it focused and tailored. And he said, we're not trying to really win here. We're trying to stop either of the 2 duopoly candidates from getting 270 electoral votes. So that was really interesting and a sharp thing to do. Maybe it wasn't a good idea. Maybe it was underwhelming, but it was thoughtful. And I really respected that. And Lars seems like a great guy who wants to see positive changes, as all these libertarians do. They believe that what their changes could offer are really positive for people who are struggling. And I really like that. Mike Termott, very personable, very funny, very affable, kind of fits the mold of what you think in a good way, what a politician should be: sharp, in shape, fit, straight back. A lot to offer as a candidate. The only reason I probably he wasn't my favorite is because I liked Rec so much. I like Rechtenwald so much, not because he was the traditional political candidate. In fact, probably because he wasn't. He was a little more mercurial, maybe a little grumpier, a little more sardonic. But he's a writer, and I come from a family of writers, and I just love the way I bought one of his books. I'm still reading it. It's really good. I'm just really focused on other things at the moment. So I really liked his poetry background, and I just thought, and his as a former Marxist, coming from a family of Marxists myself, I really had an affinity towards him. So no one was going to top him, but Mike Termott was a special guy. I could really tell that really like him, really personable. And then you had Chase, who is formidable. He's kind of, and maybe he is the best of them, and perhaps that's why he won. He could speak like Obama. He's got an encyclopedic knowledge of libertarian policy positions. He seems to really believe them. And he was personable as well. Slightly less maybe than Termott. A little slightly colder, a slightly more Vulcan, but impressive. The most Obama-like, I would say. That's a good thing, right? Hey. So, and I also interviewed Larry Sharp, and who Larry was is a big player in the Libertarian Party politics. Okay. So it was cool to watch all these guys who I'd developed relationships with and had on the show, and they honored me by doing that and lent me a ton of their credibility, to watch them go to all these various state conventions and participate in the process. This is the first time I've ever paid attention to it. So it was so cool. It's like, wow, I'm in this story. You know, these guys are doing 20 podcasts a week. I'm one of them. And they're going around and they're really running for president in the 3rd largest political party in the country. So it's very cool. As I got to know these candidates, I also got to know the internal party politics. And this goes back to Dave Smith's influence. Apparently, Dave and Dr. Rechtenwald come from this caucus, this group within the Libertarian Party called the Mises Caucus. Ludwig von Mises is one of the main thinkers that whose work creates the intellectual basis for the Libertarian Party. I think it has a lot to do about decentralization and keeping the government out of the economy. Long story short, but somehow that organization, the Mises Caucus, seems to also have developed this reputation for not being into the woke stuff, and this is going to be important for me. They're also not into open borders, which is an interesting intellectual argument within the party of like, hey, how can you be a libertarian if you don't support open borders? Because you're not supposed to believe in the state, and you're not supposed to believe in basically laws that are not from God, natural laws. So a state law about artificial borders, bullshit. No, but the libertarians on the Mises Caucus have an argument for why um, we should not have open borders. It's a little nuanced, but it's there. Okay. And these same Mises Caucus people, who you might say are kind of on the right of the spectrum within libertarian dynamics, these are the people that invited Donald Trump to speak at the convention. So there was that whole hoopla of whether that was wise or not, or whether it was intentionally for the purpose of destroying the party. Was it a good idea? Will it bring them attention? Or is it actually a backdoor effort to siphon libertarian votes to the Republicans? Because basically that's what people accused Dave Smith and all the Mises Caucus people of doing. They're saying, you guys are siphoning votes from our candidate, whoever our candidate ends up being. You're just serving it to Trump on a silver platter. And their argument for why they do that is because they say, look, our guy's not. So is the Mises Caucus saying our people have no chance of winning? The Libertarian Party has no chance of winning. So let's at least get Trump, who we can shape and influence a little more, so we don't have Biden, because Biden, we can all agree, is the worst for freedom. Because the libertarians, they would say, yeah, Trump is better than Biden, but Trump was horrible. Trump is a dictator. So there was this internal dynamic of, why are you inviting Trump? Are you really trying to help us, whoever the libertarian candidate ends up being, with media exposure? Or are you actually trying to sabotage our entire effort and make us support Trump? So that was the internal divide. Trump came. It was widely covered. I thought it was a success. So my thoughts, generally speaking, are I respected the Mises Caucus for what they did. They had a plan. They stuck to it. They got Trump there. They got media attention. I thought that all worked great. Their candidate, the Mises Caucus candidate, Michael Rectenwald, did not win. It was dramatic. He lost in like the 6th or 7th round of voting, and it was, Mike Termont stuck a knife in his back allegedly and made a deal with Chase on the convention floor. I'll be your vice president. My delegates will support you, and we'll freeze out Dr. Rectenwald. Hey, man, that's politics. It happened. And apparently it happened that way. And it's very interesting, very dramatic. But that's what happened in Chase won. So the Mises Caucus lost. And so now what are they going to do? I predict that many of them are going to vote for Trump. Take a cue from Austin Peterson's playbook. A couple episodes ago, my last guest interview was probably my best guest interview of all time. Austin is just an amazing thinker and makes for a great guest. We talked about why he's supporting Trump. He's just flat out supporting Trump. And it is because he thinks there is a bigger fight right now than, which libertarian or getting. Now, Austin ran for president, came in second place behind Gary Johnson in 2016 as a libertarian presidential candidate. So Austin is plugged into libertarian politics. Okay. He's got all these relationships with Javier Milei in Argentina. He's a liberty-minded guy, if not a libertarian at this point. But he says, no, we can't worry about getting a guy with an L next to their name in the White House. It's too big of an effort. It's not going to happen. What we need to do is get Trump elected again, because we have an opportunity and the ability potentially to shape Trump's second administration in a more liberty way. And that is just simply the best thing we can do to serve the interests of liberty at this time. It's a big split. Other people say that's blasphemy. You're a grifter. You're a Republican. Just say it. But that's essentially the split. Now, emerging from all of this victorious is Chase Oliver. Chase is as I said, formidable. He's Obama-like. He's got real presence. He's a great communicator, a great speaker. He's got all the thoughts there. He's unflappable. And so I would say that the convention was a success. Hey, Mises Caucus people, you did your thing. You did what you could. You didn't win. Now, if I were a Mises Caucus person, I think I would lean towards supporting Chase. Let me put it this way. If I were an actual libertarian, I'd be enthusiastically supporting Chase because, hey, this is our guy. He's legit. He's got the most credibility and mainstream name recognition than any candidate has ever had, because a couple of years ago he famously had this runoff. His candidacy for Senate in Georgia triggered a runoff with Raphael Warnock, and they had a one-on-one debate, and Chase did really well. He didn't win the election, but he did really well, made a name for himself. So this is very exciting, I think, unless you want to say, hey, the better move is to go with Trump. So what's the move here? Do you support your pure candidate because you're a libertarian? Or do you say, no, this guy has no chance of winning? No one ever has a chance of winning. And what we need to do is take the opportunity to ride Trump's coattails. It's kind of interesting. But I think the main reason that these Mises Caucus people don't want to support Chase, and there is a lot of chatter about people saying, hey, look, man, I'm not going to support Chase. So I think the reason is because I don't think it's because Chase is an openly gay guy. I think it's because Chase has allegedly expressed support for puberty blockers and hormone therapy in people under 18. Now, not surgery. He's never allegedly expressed any support for surgery, but Chase has, he does pride festivals, which is fine, cool. But it's the hormone therapy and the puberty blockers thing where Chase has lost some people on the right within the libertarian spectrum. And also it's just this general feeling that Chase is woke. He marched in the streets after the George Floyd's murder, and people perceive him as kind of woke, which is interesting because I'm coming out of critical race theory and I'm rejecting the woke mindset. I don't like it. I will say that when I saw George Floyd take his final breath on TV, I cried, and I was like, I was ready to protest. I almost went out into the freaking street. I almost did. I didn't, but I almost did. So I'm okay with having a heart, and I'm not going to hold it against Chase that he was protesting, regardless of what the truth is about Floyd's cause of death. We saw him take his last breath under Chauvin's knee. That was outrageous. But the question is Chase too far to the left culturally to have a serious impact in the race, or or not? So that's kind of what's going on. If I were a libertarian, a committed libertarian, those things would give me pause, but they would not prevent me from supporting Chase. So I would be supporting Chase if I were a libertarian. I guess that's the answer. What else? Well, that's really it, guys. That's my relationship to the nomination process that resulted in Chase being victorious. Congratulations, Chase. I think you deserve it. I think you're going to be a great standard bearer for the party. I think you prevailed over a very popular portion of the party, at least online, that had a lot of influence. And I think that speaks to your abilities and the underlying strength of the people who supported you, the movement. It's broader, clearly. The libertarian movement is broader than the Mises Caucus. We learned that. And so what an education it's been for me on the Libertarian Party. And I wish you the best of luck. And I think Chase, unless he changes his strategy, which he very well might now, is going to be willing to make a second appearance on my show at some time. So in August, when I'm done with the bar exam and I've got all the studying behind me and I've taken it, I will resume taking guests, and I'd love to have Chase back on. And last time I had him on, I just went through policy. It was a very dense conversation. I basically had over prepared for the interview, and I was basically drilling him on his policy positions rather than having a more chill conversation. We did have a bit of narrative in there, and so his little background story. I don't want to say his little background story. His background story as to how he became a libertarian is in there. And so I highly recommend you check out all these interviews. So interestingly, as I referenced, Mike Termott is now going to be Chase's vice president. And so if you want to get to know Mike Termott, if you want to get to know Chase, hell, if you want to get to know Lars and Rechtenwald, go ahead and listen to those past interviews. It's been a rewarding process for me to be part of the libertarian landscape, the media landscape, and it's been a real education. And I think I'll look back at this as being a pretty formative time in whatever my political identity ends up being. So thank you all for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, comment, all that crap. I shouldn't have said crap. It's meaningful, and I appreciate it, and I want you to do it. So do that, please. And we'll see you next week or in 2 weeks, maybe. This is the longest I've ever gone. This has been 2 weeks since the previous episode, but I am studying for the exam, and so I got to be laser focused. So thank you all for the support, and I'll see you soon.